Welcome and thank you for joining us for the International Student Connect Finding a Place to Live presentation. Today we're just going to talk to you a little bit about what it is like to find a place to live when you arrive here in Canada as an international student. We'll take a look at the on-campus residence, living off campus, some landlord and tenant responsibilities, and of course, as always, we will show you some of the resources that we do have available for you as an international student. Finding a place to live here in Ontario, sometimes you need to sit down and kind of think about it in a little bit of detail. So for example, you need to decide, where do you want to live? Do you want to live on campus, or would you like to live off campus? How much can you afford? What will your rent include? So is it going to be all inclusive, or will it just mean that you pay the rent and then you have to pay additional bills on top of that? When you're going to do that, I suggest that you definitely take the step of researching this information from a variety of different sources. Always inspect the apartment before you commit, and remember, we'll talk about it in a little bit more details, but please make sure that you know your responsibilities as a tenant. Now, when you decide, if you're deciding that you will be living on campus, there are a few traditional accommodations. For example, there is the traditional dorm style suites, there are semi-suites, there are suites, and there are apartment style accommodations. How do they differ? Well, the traditional rooms would consist sometimes of, more than one student in a particular room. Semi-suites are generally residents living in adjoining or double rooms, and they share a bathroom for perhaps 4 residents. And if you've got your own suite, of course, it means that you're probably by yourself. And then there comes the apartment style, where you have your own apartment. You're not sharing anything with anyone. You don't have to schedule time to use the microwave or anything like that. And then we have the off-campus housing, where you can get a room in a house, room and board. Perhaps you can get a bachelor's or a studio flat, or you can get an apartment and share it with a roommate. On-campus residence, you want to ask yourself, what does it cost to live on campus? And does it suit your budget? Will you be able to afford it? Oftentimes when you're living on campus, it is included within your tuition, so you don't have to pay this monthly, usually. So do you want to choose the dorm style or the apartment? Do you want to be sharing a room with other people? Quite recently, there was a very disturbing story of a girl who did some not so nice things to someone else's belongings in their dorm room. So you want to take all of those things into consideration and think about who you're going to be sharing this room with, as you don't necessarily have a choice in choosing the roommate that you get. Find out if there's a meal plan, and if you're required to take that meal plan, perhaps you're not. But perhaps it is mandatory for you to have the meal plan, and that would mean, again, that you'd be paying a little bit more. And how do you apply? Generally, you're applying to live on campus through your college or your university's website. The student office, the International Student Office, will be able to help you with that. And where should you look for information on residence? Oftentimes, again, it's with your International Student Office. You can go online at the university, at your institution's website, and you'll definitely find information on that. What are some of the benefits of living on campus? Well, if you think about it, if you live on campus, you know that you will be surrounded by, all the other students within your space. So you've got really student-friendly spaces that you can use. Perhaps there is an open space for activities. You can maybe watch TV, study, in these really nice spaces that are student friendly. The meal plans with the options for different diets are generally part of the benefits, so you don't have to cook your own meals. You order your meal, you say what you want, and you simply go and pick it up. There's some academic support on hand right away, and there's usually trained staff at the residences that are there to support you 24 hours. If you've broken something, you need some help, somebody's usually there. The legal rights to live on the premises, you know, when you live on campus, generally that is already included within your student agreement. When you are off campus, then generally speaking, you would have to sign a contract, a lease agreement, for example, and that literally documents the different responsibilities from yourself and your landlord. It is a legally binding agreement, so when you're going to get into this agreement, I absolutely encourage you to read it before signing it. It's not something that you should just go into saying, well, you know, I have to rent this place and I need to sign the agreement anyway. Please take a moment and go over it. The lease agreement generally covers when you're collecting or returning your rental deposits. Most rental units will come with a deposit, so you generally need to pay the first month's and the last month's rent when you're going to rent this place. So the agreement would generally cover that. Changing of locks, if you're thinking that you're going to be changing the locks, then that is also covered because that is a legally binding agreement. Permitting the landlord to enter your premises, perhaps rent increases if there are any, or if there will not be any, it's also covered in your lease. And it would also cover giving notice. So if you're planning on moving out of that unit, you also need to provide notice, and that will be covered within the lease. Moving in preparation. When you think about moving in, you want to think about what are the supplies that you need. You need bed linen, you'll need perhaps your dishes, a laundry basket, maybe a refrigerator. Again, some of these things are provided if you are living on campus. You may have a fridge in your dorm room. It may not be there. You may have to rent one from the institution. You will definitely need toilet paper. Yeah, that's not going to be provided for you for free at all. So definitely you'll need toilet paper. You'll need to have your own towels and your own bed linen. And if you're going to eat, you might want to consider having some dishes, whether they're disposable or non-disposable. We had the disposable ones. Yes, don't tell anybody. We didn't wash them. We just kind of tossed them out. So think about that so that you're prepared when you're moving in. And you always want to have some emergency supplies. You need to have a flashlight, some batteries. If you are someone who has an illness, you may want to make sure that you've got your medication, something to test your temperature, and things like that. So definitely living on campus does have its perks. You know, if I were to be going back to school, I think maybe I'll save that till the end. We'll decide at the end whether or not I'd stay on campus or off campus. How about that? Okay. Now, let's take a look at living off campus. Some of the benefits of living off campus, and I want to jump right into this. If you are anything like me, well, maybe you won't be, but if you're anything like me, some alone time, relaxation, it's critical for, you know, re-energizing yourself. And when you live off campus, you will more than likely have the opportunity to be by yourself once you've left school. It'll give you an opportunity to meet and network with people who are not students. They're non-residents, so you'll probably be able to create a wider network of support. It will teach you adult life experiences, and you'll have some personal freedom that perhaps you would not have while you're living on campus. Now, too much personal freedom may not necessarily be good for everyone, but just in case you're one of those people you're very responsible, and I think you all are, then I believe that you should be able to access this. Some of the downfalls of living off campus is commuting. Depending on how far you live or how close you live to your campus, you may run into issues of commuting back and forth within, especially the Greater Toronto area. Some of you are not going to school in the Greater Toronto area, and that's a plus. In terms of commuting, traffic can be a little bit brutal. So think about that if you decide that you're going to live off campus. Bill payments, you're going to have additional bills to pay. If you think back on when we talked about living on campus, most of your expenses are actually included in your tuition costs. So you make that one-time payment and you don't have to worry about it again. While when you live off campus, you have to think about that. You have to think about perhaps, depending on where you're living, you may have to pay your electricity bill, you may have to pay your water bill. There are some additional costs that could be incurred that you perhaps didn't plan for. You may miss some school announcement because you weren't on campus. And, say for example, you miss an announcement, but you live on campus. You may hear people within your dorm talking about it. If you are off campus, chances are you could possibly miss that. So definitely think about those things. I personally don't know that one is absolutely better than the other. Whatever suits you as an individual. And so that is why we're giving you the differences between the two. Now, if you think about some of the things that you need to do when you're choosing your home, you want to choose the location. That's one of the first things to do. Think about, where do I want to live in proximity to school? Do I want to live close to it, or do I want to live further away? Do I want to live in an urban area? Do I want to live in a more secluded neighborhood? Do I want to live in the city, kind of thing? Think about all of those things, because ultimately, once you take that spot, you've committed to it. The rental cost, you want to think about the cost. Will it cost me more to live on campus than it would cost to live off campus? If I live on campus, chances are I'll be able to access the meal plan. If I live off campus, then I will not. Which one will be more beneficial to me financially? The type of rental, do you want to live in an apartment? Do you want to have a roommate? Do you want a room in a house? Think about all of these things before you make that final decision. You want to go, because you are new to the country, please do feel free to go and visit the local police station and ask about the neighborhood that you're planning to live in. Ask about the neighborhoods surrounding your colleges in terms of, have there been violent crimes in this neighborhood? Is it safe to walk late at night alone? Things like that. You want to always protect yourself and choose extremely safe neighborhoods to live in. Believe me, Canada is a very safe country. It is very rare when, there's a mugging or something like that, but you can never be too cautious. So we would like to point out to you that you do have access to our local police. You can go to them, speak with them. If you're planning to rent off campus, you want to meet with your landlord and have a list of questions that you want to ask prior to signing a contract, a lease agreement. You also want to do some home inspection before you move into the property. So again, when you're going to get the place, think about all of these things. You want to go inside, you want to check the refrigerator, make sure that it's working, check the taps to make sure that there's water coming out of it, it's not draining, make sure there's no leak in your roof. Because ultimately, some of these things, if you don't check them beforehand, they could come back to haunt you later. Make sure you've got your camera with you. Take pictures of, the place that you're about to rent. If there are scuff marks on the walls, take the pictures. If the stove if the stove is a little bit dirty, take a picture. If the refrigerator is extremely clean, take a picture. Take a picture of everything. So you've got before and after when it's time for you to move out. And please do not forget to discuss your rental terms and agreement. Now, the next step would be that you're going to prepare for signing the lease, because now you've done all of your inspection, you've gone and you've decided that this is the location I want to live in, okay? You will need to have your first and last month's rent, so they will ask for first and last month's checks. You will need references, so perhaps they'll ask you for a reference from your school, they may ask for a reference letter. You need to have your current contact number available, and you also may need to give the landlord some post-dated checks. Most landlord will go for the post-dated checks. They'll ask perhaps if you're going to live there for 24 months, they'll ask you to have 24 months. They'll ask if you're going to live there for 6 months of post-dated checks. Some of the responsibilities that you need to keep in mind, and you need to ask the landlord these questions. Ask about your utility bills. Will you be responsible for these utility bills? What about garbage disposal? Will the garbage truck come and pick up the garbage? And what days of the week is the truck going to be coming? And how about if there are to be some home repairs? Let's say, for example, somehow your front door has stopped working. The lock has stopped working. Who's going to repair that? Will it be you, or should you call the landlord? If the refrigerator stops working, are you going to have to replace the refrigerator? Or will the landlord come in and repair it or replace it? And you want to talk about the terms and conditions of terminating your lease as well. Ask, like we said, about the utility bills. We cannot stress this more because many people don't remember, and that's why you're finding it in more than one area of this presentation. Some people forget to ask, and once you're in the rental unit, you now are saddled with an additional bill, and your income is capped because you are a student, you don't have enough money, and you're trapped in a lease. So make sure that this is something that you do. Ask about the utility bills. Ask the landlord about the average costs. Will the utility bills, do they normally pay $150 a month? Do they normally pay $200 a month for this place? Again, take pictures of the unit. I don't want to forget that. Ask about the quiet spaces that you can access, and ask about the conditions for canceling your lease agreement. Some of the responsibilities for the landlord and tenant. As a tenant, your responsibility is to pay your rent in full and on time, respect the rules of your lease agreement, clean and maintain the home that you have decided to live in. You got it clean, make sure that you maintain it. Do not, please, do not destroy the property. Tell the landlord if there are some repairs that need to be made. Do not wait until it's time for you to leave, then you tell the landlord. And permit entry with proper notice. So if the landlord wants to come in and inspect the property, please do allow them to do so. The landlord's responsibility is to collect your rent. They are to provide utilities if that is not separate and apart from the rent that you pay. They are to pay your utility bills. They are to allow you to enjoy where you live with reasonable enjoyment. There should be no illegal seizing of your property. It has happened in the past where we've had situations where landlords have decided that, well, the student didn't pay or the tenant didn't pay their rent, so I'm just going to go into their apartment and remove a laptop or remove something that's for that belongs to them of value. That is actually illegal. They can't do that. And they're not allowed to harass you or threaten you as a tenant. Please do keep in mind that your rent is due on the 1st or the 15th of each month. That is generally the flow that things follow. Late rent generally have legal implications, so keep that in mind. And you can't pay your rent at the bank in most cases. You will have to give the landlord the post-dated check. Electricity, gas, and water is considered your utilities, and sometimes you and your roommates will be responsible for utility bills. You should actually document that. If you have a roommate and you're going to be paying the bills together, then you should document the percentage that each person will be paying. And utility bills actually impact and affect your credit. So think about that. Your responsibilities when you're moving. You should generally provide your landlord with a notice in writing up to 60 days of your move date. You should contact your local utility company and remove your name from the gas, the hydro, and the water bill if that's the case. Your phone bill, if you've got your phone, if you've got a landline, then you should call the phone company, the internet, and your cable companies to have that disconnected so that you're not being billed after you've moved. Redirect your mail to your new address. You can oftentimes do that through Canada Post. There's a small fee for that, but please do that. It is quite important. You will have important bills and mail going to your old address once you have moved. Take all of your belongings and clean your unit, and remember to return the apartment key to the landlord. Now, shared accommodation is a little bit different from renting an apartment or a unit that is by itself. When you are subletting an apartment or accommodations, it means that you're sharing accommodations with the owner of the property. I want to let you know that there is actually a difference when you are subletting, okay? Now, a tenant that shares a bathroom or the kitchen with their landlord or the landlord's family, the owner's family, you do not have the same legal rights as if you were renting a space that you had your own bathroom and your own kitchen. What does that mean? That means that the landlord can evict you without any notice. They don't have to tell you 60 days before that they're going to ask you to leave. So please keep this in mind when you decide, if you decide to rent a room in a house. The only exception is if you as the tenant enter into an oral or written agreement with the owner and the owner breaks that agreement. So if you're going to be renting a room in a house, please ensure that you do get it in writing, some guidelines, so that you're not just thrown out on the street without notice, because that is definitely not a nice place to be. And we have some helpful resources here for you. You can find out some information about student housing at these websites, OntarioStudentHousing.ca. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation is very good for newcomers. It will give you market rates for rent. You can find some information about nonprofit housing, about shelters and Residential Tenancy Act. All of these can be found using these links that you are seeing here. I promised that we talk to you a little bit about the resources that we do have available under the International Student Connect project. And you may visit our website at www.internationalstudentconnect.org, where you will find a multitude of resources that are quite useful to you. There's the Ontario International Student Guide on our website. You may print that if you would like to. We've got our fact sheets, a transition plan, handbooks, and we also have some group information sessions that you can attend if you are in one of the participating colleges or universities that are a part of this project. You may also access one-on-one sessions and the webinars as you're now doing. The transition plan, as I mentioned earlier, is quite a very useful tool that can be found on our website, and this is where you would locate it. It is actually quite a useful tool for those who are planning to remain here in Canada after, especially if you're planning to remain, but not necessarily only for those who are planning to remain here after studying. It will be very helpful for you. There is the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program that has several requirements and steps that you're going to have to take in order for you to leverage that resource. So please do visit our website and check out the transition plan. A little bit about the International Student Connect project. The project is funded by the Ministry of Immigration, and this project was designed to provide support to international students and their families. The agency that is bringing you, the coordinating agency that brings you this project is Costi Immigrant Services, serving over 39,000 clients within the Greater Toronto Area through 17 locations. So as you can see, it's quite a large organization. Please do feel free to visit Costi's website at www.costi.org. If you do have any further questions, you may contact us at 1-844-871-4567, or you may email us at ic@costi.org. Thanks once again for joining us, and please do feel free to contact us using any of these methods below.